Okay, so there's a lot happening in the Middle East right now, obviously. But what if the things we're seeing, the escalating tensions, Gaza, Lebanon, and now all this focus on Iran, what if it's not just like separate fires popping up? What if there's something
Yeah.
bigger connecting them, a strategy?
That's exactly the angle some observers are taking, a really provocative one. They're basically arguing that these regional conflicts, they might be tied quite deliberately to this massive infrastructure project, the India-Middle East-Europe Economic Corridor, IM for short.
IMC.
Right.
Heard bits and pieces.
Yeah, and this deep dive, we're going to explore that theory, this idea, which is, well, it's pretty unsettling, that maybe what's happening is part of a plan to sort of clear the map so IMEC can just roll out smoothly.
Okay, so our job today is to get past the headlines, look at the connections these sources you've gathered are making, and try to give you, the listener, a clear, quick picture of what might really be going on behind the scenes. Let's jump in. So IMS, on the surface, it's sold as this, game-changing trade route, but these sources, they're suggesting it's way more than just containers on ships, right? What's the strategic play here, according to them?
That's really the core of it. It's not just economics, it's geopolitics, big time. Physically, yeah, it's about connecting ports in India, then snaking through the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Israel, and eventually linking up with European railway networks.
Okay, the route makes sense on a map. Who's backing it?
Well, you got the heavy hitters.
Yeah.
The US, the EU, India, Israel is key. And the crucial context here, which the sources emphasize, is that it's explicitly set up as a kind of counter to China's Belt and Road. So it's deeply embedded in, Western alliances and interests.
A counter to Belt and Road. Okay, that definitely frames it differently.
Exactly. And here's the kicker. For this whole thing to actually work, to be viable, it needs stable, cooperative governments all along that route. Governments that are, let's be frank, aligned with U.S. and Israeli economic goals.
Yeah.
And security interests.
Right, so this need for aligned stability, that sounds like a pretty tall order given the region. What does that requirement imply about the current situation on the ground?
It implies, implies something's got to give, according to these analyses. If IFC needs that kind of deep stability, that level of cooperation, then any group or country seen as, rocking the boat or just having a fundamentally different vision, they become a problem, an obstruction.
An obstruction, okay. And who specifically do these sources identify? Who's standing in the way of this grand vision?
They're pretty specific. Iran is probably obstacle number one in their view, but also groups like Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Houthis down in Yemen, and even, what's left of certain resistance movements in Syria and Iraq.
Why them? What makes these particular groups obstructions in this context?
Two main reasons, really. One is ideology. They're fundamentally opposed to the kind of Western-aligned order IMS represents. And two, critically, they have the means to disrupt it. Militarily, their presence, their actions, they could just derail the whole project, make it too risky, too unstable.
Okay, that brings us to something really interesting in the sources. This reported Israeli operation codename, Rising Lion. That sounds incredibly symbolic, especially when we're talking about Iran. What's the significance there?
It's loaded with symbolism, and that's kind of the point the sources are making. The lion and sun, that was the emblem of Iran before the 1979 revolution, under the Shah, the Pahlavi monarchy. So, using Rising Lion, it's not just military jargon. It strongly hints or suggests that the goal might not just be, say, punishing Iran, but maybe fostering regime change.
Regime change, wow.
Yeah, a return, or at least the rise of a government more like the old monarchy, or at least something much more aligned with the West. And this theory gets, more fuel when you see Reza Pahlavi becoming more visible.
All right, the son of the last Shah, he has been popping up more. How do the sources connect him to all this, to IMES?
Well, he's actively out there positioning himself, right, as this secular, democratic alternative. The sources point to his meetings with Western officials, appearances on big news networks, and his message is consistent. Cooperation with the West, peace with Israel, a quote-unquote modern Iran, all things that would fit perfectly, almost too perfectly, with an Iran that wouldn't disrupt IMS, might even support it. He's like the ready-made alternative.
So there's definitely pressure on Iran sanctions, cyber stuff, we see that. But usually it's framed as deterrence, right?
Yeah.
Containing them.
Right.
What are these critical observers saying is the real goal, maybe the unspoken one?
That's exactly what they call the silent objective. Despite all the official denials, they argue, look at the pattern. The crushing sanctions, the cyber ops, the targeted killings, it adds up. They see it as a kind of slow burn strategy. Attrition.
A slow burn, aiming for what?
The theory is strategic collapse. Not necessarily a big invasion, but weakening the system from within and without. Through sanctions, isolation, maybe stirring up internal dissent, until eventually the current government falls and you can install someone more compliant. And in that picture, Reza Pahlavi is sitting right there, Western-friendly, secular, the whole package.
Okay, let's shift slightly. The sources bring up this idea of a transnational deep state. Now, that term gets thrown around a lot. Can you explain how these observers are using it in this specific context? What does that lens show us?
Sure. In this view, it's not some, shadowy cabal in one country. It's more like an alliance of powerful figures in the military and intelligence and industry across the U.S., Israel, Europe, key Gulf states. And they're playing what these sources call a long game.
A long game for what?
Their strategy, according to this perspective, isn't about finding peace through, negotiation. It's about establishing order. Order through, well, sometimes through destruction first, then reconstruction. And huge projects like IMEC, they're both the prize and the justification for the tough actions needed to get there. It flips the script, right?
Yeah.
Infrastructure, not just as development, but as a motive for conflict.
Infrastructure is a motive.
Mm-hmm.
So how do they read the current conflicts through that lens? Gaza, Lebanon, Iran. Each has a purpose.
Exactly. Under this theory, nothing's random. Each conflict is seen as serving a specific function in paving the way for IMS, Gaza, neutralized, basically, to secure Israel's coast, its port access for the corridor, Hezbollah in Lebanon, being weakened, drained to remove that threat from Israel's north, near the IMP route, Syria and Iraq, kept fragmented, unstable, so no strong resistance can emerge there. Iran, as we discussed, is being softened up, is the term sometimes used, prepared for that eventual regime change. To get a government that will play ball with Western economic interests, integrate into this IMS system. So when they talk about stability in this context, it's really code. It doesn't mean peace for everyone. It means hegemony, alignment with this U.S.-led capitalist vision. One source even quoted a strategist, something like, you can't build a superhighway over a minefield. Gives you a sense of the mindset.
Wow. That's, clearing the map indeed. But the sources also call this a dangerous gamble. What are the big risks here?
Oh, the risks are enormous, absolutely huge. I mean, first, trying to destabilize a country like Iran, it could backfire spectacularly. You could end up not with a neat regime change, but with civil war, state collapse, warlords, making the region even more chaotic and dangerous. That helps nobody.
Right. Not exactly the stability IMEC needs.
Not at all. And then there's the broader geopolitical risk. This kind of perceived manipulation. It could really antagonize other major powers like Russia, China. And not just them, but countries across the global south, too. They might see this whole thing, I am included, as just neo-imperialism, Western dominance in a new guise.
And there's history here, too, specifically with Iran, that makes this potential manipulation extra sensitive, isn't there?
Absolutely critical point. The sources really stress this. For Iranians, even many who dislike the current government, point 1953 is not ancient history. It's a living memory. That's when the CIA helped overthrow their elected leader, Mossadegh, and put the Shah back in power. So any hint of Western interference now, especially aimed at regime change, it touches a very raw nerve. It could make building any kind of stable future incredibly difficult.
Yeah, that historical context is crucial. So stepping back, this deep dive really underscores how a conflict that looks regional can actually be deeply intertwined with these huge global power plays in economic reshaping.
It really forces you to connect the dots differently, doesn't it? And it leads to that final, quite profound question the sources raise. Is IMS just about trade, just an economic corridor? Or is it something more? Maybe an imperial corridor, where building infrastructure becomes, yet again, tangled up with projecting power, with war, and potentially with erasing national sovereignty along the way.
An imperial corridor. That's definitely a provocative thought to leave people with. Plenty to think about there. And we encourage you, our listeners, to keep digging into these complex connections, see where they lead.